Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ya ayyuhal kafirun la a'budu ma ta'budun wa la antum 'abiduna ma a'bud wa la ana 'abidun ma 'abadtum wa la antum 'abiduna ma a'bud lakum dinukum waliya din. Sadaqallahul azim. Ladies and gentlemen, today I welcome you to this webinar, which is an eminent part of an eminent speaker series of the Institute of Regional Studies. This webinar is on the topic of ban culture, a way to create Akhand Bharat. As we are all aware that since the coming into power of the Bharatiya Janata Party in India, the Indian state and society has been in a downward spiral towards communal discrimination, communal violence, and that is why we thought that it would be pertinent to discuss this issue today with one of our eminent speakers, that is Lieutenant General Raza Muhammad Khan, who has served as Corps Commander in the Pakistan Army and has also served as President of the National Defense University of Pakistan. He is the author of the book Peace and War, Their Prospects and Principles. With that brief introduction, I would invite Lieutenant General Raza Muhammad Khan Sahab to please give his very brief introductory remarks, which I will follow with certain question and answer questions and question and answer with the eminent speaker. And that is how we will proceed. In the meanwhile, while he's answering my questions, all the participants would also be welcome to type in their questions in the chat box, which I can ask him later on, and which he can respond to at the end of my question and answer session with him. With that, I would hand the mic over to you, Lieutenant General Khan.
Thank you, Arish. Assalamu alaikum and good morning to everyone. Thank you for being with the Institute of Regional Studies Islamabad and for being with me for the next 1 hour. I hope that all of you are feeling fresh, light, and energetic on the 23rd day of the Ramadan, and also because this is the morning time. So I think you will be able to concentrate on whatever we are saying. Now, we today are going to discuss in general the plight of the Indian minorities. And specifically, we are going to talk about the plight of the Muslims of India and what the Indian minorities can do about this, what the world needs to do about it, what the OIC can do about it, and what India itself needs to do about it. I am going to be speaking from a script mostly so that I do not miss out any essential aspect or important component of today's seminar. At the same time, as Arish said, we have tried to divide this session into a number of parts to keep your interest alive and also to avoid any monotony today. So coming to the topic, I think let me first say a few words about this mythology or this concept of the Akhand Bharat. You see, this is a slogan of the RSS which aims at reunifying 10 countries of the subcontinent. And these 10 countries, you'll be surprised to know, includes Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, the Maldives. These are all Muslim countries. And in addition to that, other countries like Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and even Myanmar. But let me, very quickly add to this that whatever is happening nowadays in India is a total antithesis of this mythology of the Akhand Bharat. And I'll give you only 3 examples, recent examples of the last 2 or 3 months. I think first of all, the Friday prayers were prohibited in public by many states in India. Thereafter, you saw the hijab ban in the educational institutions in southern India, where unfortunately Muslim students, female students, are fighting against their own institutions, against the Indian courts, against the RSS mobsters, and even against their administration, to permit them to wear the essential part of their dress, which is the hijab. Finally, I think it was only about 2 weeks back when you heard of the demolition of Muslims' property in Jahangir Puri, despite orders to the contrary by the Indian Supreme Court. So these are some of the examples, recent examples of what is happening to Indian minorities, which should be a matter of great concern for India itself, for Pakistan, for all Muslims of the world, and even the big powers. With those few words, I think I'll hand you back to Arish for the question and answer session with me and him. Please, Arish, go ahead.
Sorry, sir, I was muted. Let me you've shed some light on this Akhand Bharat philosophy of the Indian regime. So I would like to begin with asking you a very general question about the plight of minorities in India under the BJP government. What is the overall situation of minorities in India?
Okay, so I think that's a very relevant question, and for that, I'll have to take you back in history to the year 1946, when the cabinet mission of the British Empire was there in India, and they asked the Qaid why there should be a separate Pakistan. And he replied, and I quote, "The Muslims have a different conception of life from the Hindus. A Hindu will wash his hands after shaking hands with a Muslim. No Hindu will let Mr. Jinnah have a room in his building. Hindu society and philosophy are the most exclusive in the world," unquote. Now, it was these and other cogent arguments that convinced the British about the partition of India and Pakistan in 1947. And now, fast forward to the year 2002, when 1,000 Muslims were viciously murdered and another 2,000 injured in the Indian state of Gujarat, where Modi was the chief minister. At that time, a prominent Indian author, diplomat, and politician, Mr. Khushwant Singh, noted in his book titled The End of India, and I quote, "With the ruling coalition openly supporting the divisive and retrograde agenda of the fundamentalists, it is the very idea of India that is at stake. Unless a miracle saves us, the country will break up. It will not be Pakistan or any other foreign power that will destroy us. We will commit harakiri." And he continues that those who feel secure because we are not Muslims or Christians are living in a fool's paradise, unquote. And ladies and gentlemen, again, after precognition for about 10 years, the team in India that was investigating the Gujarat carnage absolved Modi of all the blame, and the blind Indian Supreme Court granted bail to the 14 criminals involved in the case 2 years back in 2020. Today, 33% of the Indian minorities belonging to the Indian Muslims and the low caste Dalits and other minorities are multi-dimensionally poor. Majority of the prisoners in Indian jails are also from the two minorities, which is Muslims and Dalits and others, and more than 55% of under trials in Indian jails are also from the main minorities, and this also includes the Christians and the tribals in the northeast of India, and this is according to official Indian data, official data. Similar instances and many more are cited by the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, which, as you are aware, gave India its lowest rating in its report for 2020. And the treatment of the minorities has also been noted by Amnesty International, the Human Rights Watch, and many others. I hope it answered your question.
Thank you, sir. But let me further probe this, and let's connect it to the human rights violations of Muslims in India, and whether we can make a case on the basis of all that you've just shared for human rights violations against Muslims in India. Whether we can make such a case.
Okay, so I will now specifically talk about the human rights violations of the Indian Muslim. Ladies and gentlemen, today the BJP and its affiliates have demanded that India's Muslim should reconvert to Hinduism and hand over various mosques and shrines to the Hindus. This has been officially declared by them many a times. The symbols of Muslim identities like beards, caps, headscarves invite suspicion, scorn, and even violence in India. And the scariest trend has been the murdering of Muslims who are even suspected of possessing beef. I mean, if they find beef stored in any Muslim's refrigerator, then they are inviting, trouble for themselves. The famous Indian intellectual Arundhati Roy once observed, and I quote, that the social and economic boycott of Muslims has pushed them further down the societal ladder and made them unwelcome in public spaces and housing colonies. This is what Jinnah said in 1946. And for reasons of safety as well as necessity, in urban areas, many Muslims, including the elite, are retreating into enclaves that are often hatefully referred to as mini Pakistans. Now, this should be of concern, I think, to every Muslim living anywhere in the world. There is a frequent war cry of the murderous mobs that have overrun India's streets in the past is, and I quote, Musalman ka ek hi stan, Kabristan ya Pakistan, meaning only one place for the Muslims, the graveyard of Pakistan. In the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, you are aware that 8 million Muslims are struggling to survive under the heaviest military occupation in the world. Here, the internet is continuously shut, firewalled, and weaponized for nearly 2 years now. And what has been recently allowed is known merely as a whitelist, a handful of regime-sanctioned websites that exclude social media platforms. The civil aviation, can you hear me, Arish?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I can.
All right. Now I come to the CAA and which has manifestly discriminated against Muslims and could create unprecedented statelessness, and is comparable to the Nazis who could decide who was a rightful citizen and who wasn't. And I'm talking of the Citizens Amendment Act in India that was passed again in 2019. And in December 2019, the first to react were the students of the Aligarh Muslim University and Delhi's Jamia Millia Islamia. What happened in response, you are all aware, but I'd like to repeat that the police attacked them with tear gas and guns. And in Delhi's iconic Shaheen Bagh protest, tens of thousands and sometimes 100,000 people, demonstrated and blocked major roads and communication hubs to come out for their rights. But unfortunately, during that same period, the coronavirus started and the Modi regime weaponized that. And subsequently, I think they blamed the Indian Muslims even for spreading the coronavirus throughout from 2019 till 2020 and even now. So again, this spawned mass protests across country with millions on the street. And the anthem of this new uprising was freedom both from caste and repression. And to the Hindu fascists, we know that Muslims are now the internal enemy whose real loyalties lie outside India. Many Indians, especially the poor Muslims, lack documentary evidence of when and where they were even born, and birth certificates cannot be found by them. So what is it going to lead to? It might lead to mass migrations of Indian Muslims either to the neighboring countries or even other countries in the West if they cannot prove that they are Indian citizens. So while non-Muslims in the CAA would not be bothered, undocumented Muslims would abruptly bear the onus of providing that they are Indians. And Mr. Shashi Tharoor, an MNA of the Indian National Congress and a prominent Indian parliamentarian, lamented in the Indian Parliament about the CAA, and I'd like again to quote him. And he said, India's soul stands divided because of the CAA. Now, totaling around 209 million, that is the estimate of the year 2018. The Indian Muslims constitutes the world's third largest and biggest Muslim minority population. But their share in the parliament is currently at a 50-year low. In the 1980 elections, ladies and gentlemen, almost 10% of the elected were Muslims. But in 2014 and thereafter, this representation was less than 4%. And although Muslim population is 14.2% of the total Indian population, their portion in elite government services is less than 1%, while over 38% of Muslims continue to live in poverty, I would say abject poverty in urban areas. I hope that answers your question, Harish.
Thank you, sir. From what you've described, it appears to be a case of Islamophobia. Would you agree with this contention? And if yes, what do you think could be done to address it?
Absolutely. I think Islamophobia in India is mainstream. Since the rulers have declared Muslims as subservient to Hindus and to particularly to the upper class Hindus. They are linked on suspicion of storing beef, as I said earlier, and forced to chant the Hindu slogan of Jai Shri Ram to prove that they are loyal to India. Further, since the fall of Kabul in August, the hashtag Go to Afghanistan targeting Muslims trended on Indian social media. That is a repeat of the perpetual anti-Muslim hashtag Go to Pakistan campaign launched by the RSS since the last many years and since Modi has come to power. Now, this is part of the BJP strategy for political gains, unfortunately. And those who dare to challenge it are labeled foreign agents. They are heavily trolled through social media and jailed. In 2020, the Indian Supreme Court legalized, without evidence, as you are aware, and as I said earlier, the construction of a Hindu temple on the site of a 470-year-old mosque at Ayodhya. And to erase Muslim heritage in India, BJP lawmakers desire to rename the Taj Mahal as the Ram Mahal. And the Chief Minister of UP or Uttar Pradesh, with more than 45 million Muslims, is unfortunately the founder of the Yuva Vahini, which is a Hindu terrorist organization. He has stated that he wouldn't stop until he turns UP and India into a Hindu state. In February 2015, he commented, and I quote, "If given a chance, we will install statues of Hindus' deities in every mosque," unquote. And this year, the Genocide Watch warned of an impending massacre of Indian Muslims in India. We are also aware, that in 2019, Mr. Modi used every lever of his power and his nexus with the RSS to deploy the most immoral schemes like divide and rule, to rule of Muslims and Kashmiri bashing and the abuse of Indian security apparatus for aggression and false flag operations against Pakistan to achieve a second term. Soon after, the Article 370 was scrapped, curfew was imposed, and even now, over 1 million Indian troops are there to convert the Kashmir Valley into the biggest jail in the world. And I think I will recommend all your audience to read the New Yorker magazine's documentary of December of 2019, which gives the details of what is happening to the Kashmiris in India. Also, the recent attempts to alter the demography of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir by granting domicile to 25,000 Indian nationals is being opposed by Kashmiris across the political divide, throughout the world. But unfortunately, this is still going on. I talked of how Muslims were treated during the COVID-19 lockdown. And today, gross human violations of all minorities, particularly Muslims in India, have been elaborated by many human rights organizations. And I think during the last meeting of the OIC in Islamabad, it was highlighted that Islamophobia all over the world is rising, but particular concern was expressed on Islamophobia in India, and we hope that the OIC and other Muslim countries would be able to take stock of this situation and do something about it. I also hope that the Anti-Islamophobia Day declared by the United Nations General Assembly in March every year would go a long way in curbing Islamophobia all over the world, particularly in India. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, sir. From what you've shared with us until now, it seems like the challenges to religious minorities in India are enormous, not just Muslims, but other minorities. What do you suggest that can be done to alleviate their plight, for them to reclaim their rights and their safeguard their interests?
Okay, Arish, again, I'll I think, take you back a little to the post 9/11 era, which has seen unfortunate conflation of Islam with terrorism. And India has particularly taken advantage of this. And there is, you can see the rise of anti-Muslim politics and legislation against travel or migration by Muslims in the United States, in Europe, and also against feminine Islamic piety, which is headscarf and veil, in the US, Europe, and particularly in India, as I said earlier. And last year, the Prime Minister wrote to all leaders of Muslim countries for cooperative action to counter Islamophobia, and even to the Facebook CEO for banning Islamophobia. This year too, Pakistan urged the OIC for a vigorous counter Islamophobia strategy. And these efforts are laudable. However, they are not enough to achieve the preferred outcome. And I think in 2012, the OIC had also approved an international channel to counter Islamophobia, which has unfortunately not seen the light of the day. And we hope that that soon comes on air. But I think India has been evading the pressures of not only the OIC, but many international organizations, and Islamophobia keeps on. And India is talking of, it is fueling misperceptions of Islam and anti-Muslim prejudice. And what is happening in India is that the rulers have declared that Islam and all its 209 million Muslims as adversaries, and they are labeled as foreign agents. Indian Muslims and diaspora all over the world, particularly in the P5 and the G5 countries and the Middle East, first of all, they need to rise to the occasion and to challenge this vigorously. So I think that Indian Muslims themselves need to rise to work for this. Besides, there should be innovative, multifaceted response toolkits for the purpose within India, which could encompass at least many items like quoting the United Nations Human Rights Council's resolution of I think July 2020 that endorses limitations on freedom of opinion and expression and prohibits advocacy of religious hatred, both online and offline, and incitement to discrimination. This, again, I think can be very easily invoked by the Indian diaspora living abroad, particularly in the United States and in the European Union. Now, counter Islamophobia movements and endeavors by individual Indian Muslims must set off, and even Indian NGOs and civil society organizations, they actually must set off broader reckoning against racism, hate speech, and holding politicians accountable for odious, rhetoric against Muslims. And contributions of Muslims to the society must be highlighted within India while deconstructing dominant Islamophobia narratives and reconstructing new, positive, and realistic descriptions around Muslims. Islamophobic attitude and discriminatory projects must be challenged through the media and academic discourses as well. And fake stories that Islam and Muslims constitute a demographic threat or pose the risk of conversion of the native Muslim population must be exposed. I'm also recommending legal measures that must be pursued and funded at the national and international levels to counter institutional Islamophobia, all over the world, and particularly in India,
and sacrilegious media content, besides writing letters, by individuals and societies to newspapers, magazine editors, and others. I would like to add to that, counter Islamophobia campaigns, marches, and vigils that should be organized by the Muslims of India in collaboration with the other minorities, and they should be attended by Muslim communities who must encourage their family member and friends to join such initiatives. Then vigorous drives on social media is extremely important. They must be launched against anti-Islamic and xenophobic state policies, or treating sporadic violence by individual Muslims as a monolithic Islamic phenomenon. The OIC, again, I would say, must caution and penalize India for state-sponsored Islamophobia and alienation of the world's third largest Muslim population. It must also warn all countries where Islamophobia prevails. And this again holds good for the Indian politicians, that because of their policies, they could permanently estrange their Muslim population, endangering their societal cohesion and national security. So I think this is important that the Indian Muslims collectively do it, whether they're residing in India, or whether they're residing outside India, anywhere in the world. I hope it answers your question.
Thank you, sir. You mentioned toolkits. Actually, the Indian government is also allergic to toolkits. Recently, it jailed an activist for launching a social action toolkit. Having said that, you talked about the role of the OIC and the pressure it has been trying to build. But as you said, the Indian government has so far been evading all such pressure. So in such a situation, what do you think is the responsibility of the major powers? Over to you, sir.
Okay, I think I'd first like to talk about the responsibility of the Indian minorities themselves, if that is all right with you. I think they have essentially two broad options, and the first one is peaceful congregations like the one against the CAA, mild non-cooperation, passive defiance, non-violent resistance, marches, placard waving, and other pacific methods, the use of other pacific methods. Again, non-violent obstruction of access to major communication infrastructure like airports, or blocking main highways intermittently, as they did in the CAA protests, because they cannot afford turning public opinion against them, or help legitimize legal actions or the use of force against protesters. So they have to be very careful. And if the government uses violence against peaceful protesters, they must protect themselves, through all means, as moderate democratic thought has long held that individuals have a right to counter violence in self-defense against tyrannical government and political injustices. This will certainly develop a momentum of its own, which might go beyond this customary option. And therefore, when we then come to the second option, and that is about a durable and collective political struggle combined with peaceful measures. And as part of this course, Indian Muslims must devise a political survival strategy based on cooperating with other oppressed minorities to vote for the party best placed to defeat the BJP, notwithstanding the dispersal of Muslims all over India. And such alliance could lead to unity among all oppressed subgroups to acquire more political space and regain some of their constitutional rights. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, that by 2060, a Pew estimate has shown that there will be more Muslims in India than anywhere else in the world, and they will constitute more than 19% of India. However, if the present state of affairs continues, their representation in the parliament is unlikely to rise without formation of coalition with others. And so is the case for the other minorities, unless they form coalitions. And I'm talking now of the big factions. As I said, the Muslims are about 209 million, and the Dalits are about 230 million. Add to this the Sikhs and the Christians, which form, I think, another 50 million. So put together, I think all the minorities of India, they comprise half the population of India. So they can actually become a big political force if they unite and find more political space for them. And I hope that works. And if that also does not work, then I think the Indian minorities will be compelled to ask for themselves, another partition of India, so that they can, live in peace. And in any case, I think this will suit the Indian class system, wherein they think that all other minorities living with them or interacting with them would pollute their societies, and they want to segregate themselves from them. So I think they may be compelled to ask for separation from India if the present status of the violation of their human rights continue in India. I hope it answers your question. Okay, so Arish,
Yeah.
now I think
my other question remained unanswered.
All right. So now, so you said, what can the international community do about it? You see, the plight and the wishes of the Indian Muslims cannot be ignored for long by the international community due to, as I said, the enormity of the size of the Indian minority populations. Let's say more than 500 million people. The nature and scale of their oppression and their adverse consequences. Neither can the world overlook the dangers of the new spike in India's revisionism and ultra-nationalism, which can endanger, again, as I said, the societal cohesion of India itself. And if India breaks, I think it should be of concern to not only the region, but to the entire world. And they must, prevent this, and they must preempt the genocide of minorities, particularly the Muslims, because it could lead to, as I said earlier, mass internal displacement and unprecedented migration by Indians abroad, creating a global crisis. And they need to stop their bets on the BJP rulers, as they are actually a liability and a cause of embarrassment for India and for them due to their undemocratic and apartheid practices. It is in their interest to admonish the Saffron Brigade for their deafness to the well-being of its own citizens and to make their support to India conditional to equal treatment, economic benefits, religious and job protection to their minorities. The international community needs to compel India to annul its unilateral actions to change the status of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, as it has endangered regional peace, caused tensions among the nuclear neighbors, and violates the United Nations human rights, all United Nations human rights, legislations and resolutions. As India's information siege of Kashmir continues for over 2 years, it remains a blot on the conscience of humanity and all the big powers, which warrants correction by them and the UN Security Council. So again, in addition to that, I think there is a role for the Indian media themselves and the international media, which must, cover all the treatment of the harsh treatments of the Indian minorities. And unless they do that, I think it will be very unfair on their part, and it will be against, the norms of journalistics or media principles. And I think the West procrastination on the grave human rights violations is actually causing resentment, and it could tarnish the US reputation and the European reputation, not only in India, but also abroad, and also within the 2 billion Muslims comprising 57 OIC countries. So once again, I think it is a big responsibility of the international community, the OIC, the Indian media, the international community themselves, to make sure that whatever is happening in India as it relates to their human right, it is stopped, and their human rights, if they deserve, according to the Indian constitutions, are restored back to them. I hope it answers your question.
Thank you, sir. All the developments happening inside India that you shared with us sound very, very alarming. But what do you think? Do all these developments have certain implications beyond the Indian borders, especially for Pakistan? If yes, what should be the way forward for us?
Okay, so I think this is a very relevant question, and I think this is a question on the lips of every Pakistani. Although Pakistan has its own limitation, but Pakistan is doing whatever it can at the level of the OIC, at the level of the United Nations General Assembly, and I think our senior leadership has always highlighted the issue of the plight of the Indian Muslims and all Indian minorities at all forums. But I think Pakistan needs to continue to further mobilize international public opinion in favor of, in favor of getting or restoring back the human rights of the Indian Muslims in particular. And it could organize global awareness initiatives, peaceful ones, and protests at influential world capitals, and even issue calendars for the same. Extensive use of all social media platform, I think, by not only Pakistan, but all OIC countries needs to do. And at the same time, I think not only Pakistan, but the affluent OIC countries, if need be, that they need to purchase airtime on foreign media to inform the world about what is happening in India, how Islamophobia is getting mainstream in India, and what are going to be the consequences of that. I think the plight of the Indian Kashmiris, we need to continue highlighting that to the world. And this needs to be done, I think, in collaboration with our friends and partners, in consultation with China, the UN, the HRW, the OHCHR, Amnesty International, the USCIRF, the Commission of Human Rights, and the Council of European Union, and OIC. And of course, the growing Islamophobia in India and the atrocities in the Indian occupied J&K must be highlighted, I think, through all special meetings of the OIC at the summit level or at the foreign minister level for punitive diplomatic and economic sanctions against India. Unless, these sanctions are applied, I think whatever is happening in India would continue to happen, and it would be very difficult to stop it. I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for answering all my questions. We are nearing the end of the time of the session, but we have a question in the chat panel from my colleague, Syed Imran Sardar. He's asking, do you think recent trend and tide against the minorities, especially Muslims, will continue with the same pace if Congress comes into power in the future, or if international community, especially OIC, pressurizes India? Or these trends, or are these trends irreversible altogether? And secondly, do you see mass migration of Indian Muslims to Pakistan and other Muslim countries in the future?
Okay, I think I'll answer the last portion of this question first. You see, I think some migration from India to Bangladesh, I think is going on because the border between Bangladesh and India is neither fenced nor is it defended the way it is done between India and Pakistan. So that is happening, and I think Indian Muslims would also be migrating either officially or unofficially to many other countries. Many of them probably, once they go back, they go to other countries, whether Muslims or non-Muslims, on official visas. They may not, be motivated to come back to India because of what they are facing there. And that should actually then lead to brain drain and also, flight of capital from India and skilled labor from India to the Middle East and other countries of the world. Coming to your question about whether there will be any change if the Indian opposition comes to power, yes, there may be a change, but the change is likely to be very small because I think in the past we have seen that the Congress has been promising better life to the Indian Muslims. But when it came, to certain major decisions like the CAA or the abrogation of Article 370, I think within the Congress itself, the majority did not oppose it. So one cannot say with certainty if there would be any positive changes. So I think I will take you back to what I've been saying, that the onus will lie on the Indian Muslims themselves, which is a substantial part of the Indian population. And if they can actually form coalitions with the other big minorities, and if they could find greater political space, they would be able to bring a difference. Similarly, unless OIC applies political, diplomatic and economic pressures on India at the collective level and even at the individual level of affluent Muslim countries and even affluent Muslim businessmen, once they apply the pressures to the Indian economy and withdraw their capital from India, I think that will be the time when India would reconsider its policies. We are aware, that there is a very large Indian diaspora in the Middle East and in countries like Dubai, Saudi Arabia. I think it is those countries which can actually play a vital role in countering Islamophobia in India, and we hope that they will realize this and they will do that. I hope it answers your question.
It does, sir. Well, we could continue with the discussion, and it's a very interesting topic, and we could go on and on. But since it's Ramadan, and you've been talking for continuously for about an hour now, So I think we'll end it here, and I would like to thank you for the very insightful remarks. It has really educated us on the situation of minorities in India as it stands. It is alarming. It is unfortunate, but it's the way it is. I think my colleague Imran has he wants to give you a thumbs up. I thought it was a raised hand, but it was a thumbs up. So thank you so much for taking time out in Ramadan for us. Maybe we'll have another session with you sometime soon after Eid, and we'll have another discussion on this. Thank you so much once again, sir. Thank you.
Harish, again, my gratitude to the IRS, to the organizing committee, to yourself, and all others who were associated in organizing this very important seminar, I think in a very befitting manner. And of course, it was my privilege. And again, my thanks and gratitude to all of you. And hope to see you some other day, some other time, inshallah, after Eid. And Eid Mubarak to all of you in advance. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Eid Mubarak to you as well. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.